Paul was just walking around and showing me around. It's like, and I remember thinking like, how does he get them to work so hard? Why do they work so hard? Like, what's the point? And then you just get so sucked into this. Is this good or bad? Like, what's going on? I'm Gianmarco. I'm product director for HaloITSM. I started like everyone else starts today at Halo. I started on the grad scheme back in 2020. I joined and blinked and here we are. It's been quite a ride. HaloWay for me at the beginning was 18 people in a 3-bedroom house putting their head down from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day on 3 phone calls at once.
Where do you see your future?
In terms of my progression, is I'd love to be able to mentor someone to have a similar trajectory to what I've had. If you mentor someone and they become better than you, that's when you've really made it. And that's something I'm struggling a little bit with, in the sense of like, why haven't I been so able to do that with someone?
What are you on today? To answer the controversial question, why the Halo way might not be for you.
Just avoiding the question. I think the way I always like to look at this is...
the podcast where GM gets fired. Welcome back to the Halo Way podcast. So in this season, we've explored company culture, both with people internally and some external guests. And we've also explored what the Halo Way is. But what if the Halo Way isn't for you? So today I am joined by Gianmarco Rubino, Director of our ITSM product, and he has come in to answer that very question. So GM, thank you for being on the pod.
It's a pleasure. Been waiting 9 months. I thought you were trying to avoid me, but it's good to be here.
I'm sure it's worth the wait. Do you want to start by giving an introduction as to who you are?
Well, yeah, I'll try to. So I'm Gianmarco. I'm a product director for HaloITSM, I guess. And
You're not sure?
No, I think I'm sure. And yeah, just working on expanding and growing HaloITSM globally.
Cool. And you started on the grad scheme?
Yeah, I started on the grad scheme back in 2020. Joined. I always say it's employee number 19 because there were 18 people before me at the time, but that doesn't really include the people that had joined and left before me. So
You only found out when you looked in the database.
Yeah, it's a bit of a lie, but you know, I guess I have been here more than most people, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess in some ways you could see me as one of the OGs. I always say I joined and blinked and here we are. It's been quite a ride.
So, but you did sort of the things that everybody else has done. So Tim said that he started on the support desk.
Yeah, definitely. I've started like everyone else starts today at Halo. So my first day I was given a laptop and an induction and thrown some tickets, and obviously was working through them with someone, and yes, slowly, day by day or week by week, month by month, started to understand
year by year.
Year by year, still trying to figure out. No, I started to understand, something about first a ticket, then a feature in Halo, and then a Halo product, and then the ITSM, ITIL industry, it kind of step by step. But yeah, in terms of what I did when I joined is definitely grad scheme type activities. So mostly support, some shadowing. I remember my first day I shadowed a demo by Tom, Tom Monahan. And I was like, wow, his voice is so reassuring. He knows what he's talking about so much. And as I said, it's things have progressed very quickly since then.
Yes. So then so one of the things Tim was saying, not that this is a podcast about Tim, but Tim has done so many different roles. So he said he did some implementations and then he did sales for a bit. Did you go straight into consultancy and then stayed there for a while? Or did you think about doing anything else?
Yeah, so there was some shadowing, right? I remember, and perhaps this is one of the things that has changed the most. At the time, it was very, very easy to get exposure to everything the business did, right? Because, as I said, there was 20 people roughly. And, you used to go a lunch break and speak to someone who is the only person doing account management in the last month of the day, and then you learn about it. So either just through speaking to people that did different roles a lot, or straight up shadowing, I did get some exposure. But in terms of the actual roles I did, right, it was pretty much try to solve some tickets, learn how to solve those tickets, do some small implementations, and then help customers set up Halo, right? Then do some slightly larger implementations and help customers set up Halo in a slightly more complex way. And then go help customers and tell them how they should set up Halo because you've done so many implementations that you should know. And obviously from there, it evolved into a more product management type role where I was not working with customers directly so much, but was more working on our roadmap, our functionality, like what should the product do? How do we make it easier for customers to achieve certain things? And that was really when I started to become more passionate about it, or I really started to see a vision, a long-term vision as to what the product would become, and started perhaps doing a bit more industry-wide research. But that was only like 2 or 3 years in. For the first 2 years, it was pretty much as anyone else that joins today.
And so now you, having joined the grad scheme, you now run the product. What does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, that's that's a difficult question, tricky question.
Yeah.
I think we should get on counter going because
briefly summarize.
I think firstly what I'll say is no day is the same as my previous one. It's not that it was ever exactly that way, but there was a more structured pattern.
Yeah.
Now what I do differs so much day by day and week by week that is really hard to say. But that's because I wear many hats.
Yeah.
Right. I'll give you some specific examples because otherwise I'm just avoiding the question. I would collaborate with the salespeople for more technical sales presentations. Right. So I will go and either look at the foundations of the product, the data model, and explain what it looks like from the sort of the ground up, which is a more sort of technical overview of the product. A lot of that I do in terms of establishing new partnerships, right? So when you speak to a new partner, they're way more interested in the technical side and in the sales side at the beginning, right? Especially the technical team. So what are the strengths of a product? How does it compare to the competition? What are we going to do to make it better in the future? So I lead a lot of those conversations. And in that sense, I kind of like that because I do see myself as being very operational. Some may say, and I think they're right, probably too operational, but I do like the fact that I'm actually still doing stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So there's that side. Then there's definitely an element of thinking, right? I always say that my trajectory at Halo was from just doing a lot of work and becoming better at doing it more efficiently in a shorter time frame, right? Now I do slightly less work, but I really, really need to nail my decision making. So I really mull over decisions, and there's stuff that keeps me up at night and stuff.
I was going to say that will really get to you.
and that is part of my day to day, waking up
night to night.
night to night. So obviously that's a very different element to the operational side I was talking about earlier. There's still a product side to it. Right. So one of my favorite things is sitting down with Daryl. Daryl's the CTO, and saying like, Daryl, we need this feature. Like, how do we do it? And just sometimes you get into a bit of a rabbit hole of complexities and things like that. But there's definitely a technical side to that as well that I really enjoy. And there's some mentoring. I work quite closely with Jason.
Love Jason.
Yeah, everyone loves Jason. Who doesn't love Jason? And again, it's almost a fourth part of what I do, right? Because it's more like communicating my vision for the product to Jason so he can execute it. For those who don't know, Jason is now taking on as product owner, so actual more day-to-day maintenance of the roadmap. So yeah, hopefully that's an answer, a bit long-winded, but
yeah, no, I think that shows a good variety. You're doing all sorts of things all the time, so sometimes
sometimes I shoot some podcasts.
Sometimes you do podcasts. Sometimes you do. I always like seeing you doing a support shift because you just seem so happy. You're like, it's my favorite day.
Yeah. Well, I guess that does fall into the mentoring as well. Obviously, you need to spend some time with some newer people. That's very, very important. We'll get to it. I think I can kind of read your questions, but
because I think we're getting there because it's important to communicate the Halo way.
Yeah. Definitely.
To the new starters.
So from a mentoring perspective, yes, very closely with Jason, just so he can take up some of the responsibilities in my role. Yeah. But obviously very, very important to spend time with newer people as well. You're mentioning support shifts. So a day a month, I literally spend my whole day helping our newer staff that run the service desk, and I just give them assistance, right? And the way I do it, everyone else does it. But you are right. I really do enjoy that side of it as well. And another example is actually exactly an hour ago, I spent an hour just with the newest grad intake. So people that joined 10 days ago, I think, a week or so ago, and spoke to them about what HaloITSM is, what ITIL is, went back to when ITIL was published in the 90s and differences between ITIL v3 and ITIL 4 and all that stuff. And they always look a bit confused, but but I did get some amazing questions at the end. I think they're going to be good.
I was going to say, I'm actually unsurprised that you get good questions because they're usually very switched on new starters, handpicked. So yeah, speaking of communicating the Halo way to new starters, do you want to start with what you specifically think the Halo way is?
Yeah, I think the way I always like to look at this is how the Halo way was communicated to me, right?
Yeah.
Because some may say, I wouldn't say that myself, but some may say that it has been communicated to me quite effectively.
Yeah.
And I remember this vividly, that I got a job offer for Halo, and I was a bit undecided. The company looked a bit weird.
Well, how did you end up applying? Because just a bit of a segue, but you did PPE?
Economics and politics. So
Economics and
not
politics.
too different, yeah.
But you weren't anywhere near Suffolk?
No.
So how did you find a small tech company?
Yeah. In fact, that's probably a good way to get to the Halo way. So let's go through my application.
Start at the beginning.
Start at the beginning. I graduated in 2020, so pandemic time, and I'm originally Italian. I have no family here or anything, and in pandemic time, I wanted to stay here. I didn't want to go spend COVID with my family in a flat. If my family is watching, I'm sorry. But I just really didn't want to. And so I was looking for a job. I remember I sent 150 applications, roughly, and I got 2 offers.
Yeah, nice.
That means 148 rejections. And the first offer I got was from Halo, right? Yeah. And I was quite picky. Well, clearly not very picky, but I definitely was targeting smaller companies, primarily not in London. The reason for that is because I didn't want to live in a city.
Yeah.
Didn't really like the idea of moving to London. Remote working was picking up. That did kind of intrigue me at the time. Or be somewhere far from London.
Yeah.
But still in the UK. And at the same time, in just a smaller company. Again, I don't necessarily like authority too much or micromanagement, too much control over what I do. And that kind of restricted the selection. Those companies at the time, if it's smaller, were going through a lot of uncertainty. Anyway, long story short, I got this phone call with Paul where he asked me, but can you actually speak Spanish and Italian? I was like, yeah, I guess. And I was like, oh, great. Do you want a job? And I was like, yes. And I remember, though, I was quite wary because I went onto the website and it looked like, I don't know, I don't want to say a scam company, but I wasn't too, let's just say that our website has gone a long way since. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, I accept the offers, but I'd like to come and visit the office.
Okay.
Right? And we are getting into the Halo way.
Yeah.
I know it's a long-winded answer, but before I accepted the offer, I came to Stowmarket and Paul was here and he walked me through the office. And I remember just feeling so different to everything I had imagined, right? I get into a room and there's Tim that is on 2 phone calls at the same time, right? On one, he put them on hold and he's running some scripts. I think in retrospect, he told me he was like adjusting stock levels of stuff that he does. And on the other one, he was like downloading TeamViewer, telling them how to download TeamViewer to get a remote support session going. And everyone else in the room, people were on calls. and it just looked so busy. And there was like 6 people in that room, and they made the noise of like 50 people. And I was like, wow, this is like, there's so much going on in here. And then I went upstairs where there was the developers room, and no, actually the developers were working from home. It was a sales room. Sorry, it was a sales room. And I walk in super quiet, probably just sending some emails and stuff, head down. And I remember thinking like, and Paul was just walking around and showing me around. It's like, how does he get them to work so hard? I wonder if he's like, I don't know, is this good or bad? Like, what's going on? Like, but I was intrigued. There's something about like that hard working vibe that I really enjoyed. And then I joined, and I remember being a bit like, oh, I'll never be like that. Like work-life balance, and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I was like, why do they work so hard? Like, what's the point? And then you just get so sucked into this in a positive way. You see that people just are so motivated to grow the company, right? And I could vividly see that from 19 out of 19 people that were there at the time. Yeah. And I was like, I want to be like them, right? I want to have that motivation, I want to have that drive to come into work and enjoy it, right? And that's just how I understood, or how it was communicated to me, that this is a place where above everything else, you really put your head down, right? And you have the ability to progress if you put your head down. You're not putting your head down just so someone else can sit there and control the work that you're doing and get the praise for it, or the rewards for it, right? And that's something that within the first few weeks I just was shown. And
that's a quick absorption of the Halo way. I think maybe nowadays it takes a bit longer to understand.
It's definitely one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah.
Because it even just look at the office space, right? It is very easy. Walk through rooms, you see everyone, see how they're working. Right now, there's so much going on, and different spaces, and much bigger office. So to have the full vision of it, right? It takes more time. You just need to experience get exposed to different people as well. But I do still think that we can do it. We can communicate it, and we can definitely have people just learn it by seeing others.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they still are. You can see that. You can see it's working. But yeah, I think it probably does take longer.
Yeah. And then there was another element of the Halo way, which is probably the most important one, which is I like to call it like can I say this in the podcast? The no bullshit approach. Is that allowed?
I don't know. We haven't decided whether or not to allow swearing, but yeah, I don't know. What do you think it's allowed?
The no BS approach. That way. Well, let's just say it's definitely allowed in closed doors at Halo. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be here.
The podcast where GM gets fired.
Yeah. The no BS approach. I'll elaborate on that. Like, what does that mean? Like, it's just an extreme focus on getting stuff done, right? So you could look at it and call it different things. You could call it the Pareto law or efficiency 80-20 rule, right? Yeah. Where you really, really focus on the 20% that actually matters to deliver the 80% of value. And in that case, what I call BS would be the rest of the 80%, the bells and whistles, right? Completely ignore, completely focus in sort of fulfilling tasks at a sort of very, very fast and efficient rate, right?
Yeah.
And that's true at a micro level, right? When you gotta get a feature out there, when you gotta get a project done, right? But that's even more important at a macro level when you look at strategy, right? You don't worry about, going to set up a different office, right? You don't worry about all the secondary aspects that might slow you down in achieving the outcome, which is global expansion, for example, right? You really, really go and work on the basics first, get those sorted, right? And that's something that indirectly I learned so much within my first 6 months, because everyone was doing it at a micro level when I'd look up someone solving a ticket, and a macro level when I heard Paul discuss what to do to establish a partner program, for example, right? I just think that this lack of bureaucracy contributes to it as well, I think. But that is something that is definitely part of this secret sauce that we call the Halo way.
Yeah, I was in an interview with Tim, and that's one thing that he's not testing necessarily whether people already do that, but he's testing whether people understand why we do that and explaining why we do that, specifically with the 80-20 rule. And you can see, if people get it or not. That's quite big.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily good or bad or right or wrong, because you cannot follow the 80-20 rule if you're a surgeon, right? Like, obviously it's not like some...
I hope not.
Well, no, but it's worth saying, because it's not like it's something that it's always right, and we can preach and say that everyone should do it that way, right?
For sure.
And even within Halo, right? We don't follow the 80-20 rule when we're upgrading a live instance for 500 customers, right?
Good. Yeah.
So there's levels to it, and there's obviously caveats and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's not relevant to all roles, but it's definitely prevalent throughout everything we do. It's very important, in my opinion, in the SaaS world and software development, right? Yeah. And that's why primarily when we look at hiring and when we look at teaching people the basics, that's definitely one of the things we want to communicate.
I think the wider kind of thing of that is, and it's across many different things, is making decisions contextually. Because I think a lot of companies just have like blanket rules and blanket processes, and actually, if we took the 80-20 rule and just put it in everything, that wouldn't work either. So it's actually like thinking about what you're doing, which a lot of companies don't do.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing, kind of related to that, and one of the reasons we've brought you on today is to answer the kind of seemingly controversial question, but not really, of why the Halo way might not be for you, which I know you have some thoughts on.
Well, I just think, firstly, we touched on it a second ago, right? For example, 80-20 rule, why some people in an interview, you could clearly see that they don't get it. They don't want to work that way. They're either perfectionists or they like perfection without being perfectionists, which is arguably even worse. But for one reason or the other, they wouldn't be able to operate that way, right? Perhaps what they really like, instead of task execution or instead of breadth, is depth. Right? And that's one example in terms of a profile, and someone who perhaps really starts studying and digging deep into certain areas, right? Because we're so fast paced and so focused on executing, that might not work, right? And that's fine. And
do you not think there are some roles that require depth, like more development roles?
100%. Yeah. And I think we said it earlier, like you don't follow the 80-20 rules when you're upgrading 500 customers, right? And security, like now the security massive. You don't cut corners when it comes to security. We definitely don't want to end up having a similar situation to CrowdStrike. Don't think we could, but obviously, don't want to cut corners with that type of stuff, right? And in that sense, yes, QA roles definitely require a lot of depth and specialization. But when you hire, right, sometimes or if you look at our hiring policy, yes, sometimes we do want someone for a specific role. But if we talk about the average, Halo grad, right, someone who joins the program, we really want them to be like the majority of the company, right? And that's not for everyone, right? That degree of efficiency and focus on the outcome is not for everyone. Sometimes because of the perfectionism, but there is also an element of, I think it's not controversial to say that you are somewhat left to your own device at Halo, even nowadays.
Yeah,
right?
you get a lot of autonomy and responsibility.
Yeah, that's a sugar-coated way of putting it, but like you're left to your own device, which in some ways is really good. For some people, is really good, right? So people, I dare say like myself, that don't really like necessarily an extreme level of management control, being told what to do. No, but generally speaking, right? The idea of setting your own path, understanding how to achieve certain outcomes yourself, right? It's almost like they like the challenge of, I got to figure it out myself, right?
Yeah.
In that sense, you're not given an extreme amount of sense of direction, right? But if you're motivated, you're given the tools, right, and the support to be able to achieve that, right? And that's not for everyone, because some people really, really, really like the, not necessarily the micromanagement. I don't think anyone likes that, but they, but they do like the very precise goal setting, right? You need to go from A to B, and you need to take these steps to get from A to B, right? As opposed to, you need to achieve something, go and achieve it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And the problem is sometimes what you need to achieve is quite woolly or quite undefined. Like, you need to become very good at implementing a customer, right? Well, that's myriad of different skills in one person or at once, right? But if someone enjoys the challenge, they will become very good at it. And we have a lot of examples of people that have done that, right? And we also have some examples of people that don't really accept that that's how we work. And that's where perhaps they don't fit the culture.
Yeah. It was interesting. So somebody else we were talking to, Caitlin, on the podcast, we were talking about something similar about take ownership and set your own goals, because life is like that. And nobody's going to do that for you. But the other side of that is, I think maybe some people don't quite believe it, because it's almost a strange thing. You've been through school and you have to do X, Y, and Z, and then you go through university or whatever, and you come here and it's like, it's up to you. And it's a bit like, what? There's no set things or no assignments. And it's like, am I actually allowed to do that? And I think it's a bit difficult to sometimes make that leap.
Yeah, it's definitely, in some ways, depending on your background, but very often the opposite of what you always thought you should do.
Yeah.
Right? You always thought, not everyone, of course, but you are accustomed to following a path, right? And suddenly there's no set path in front of you. So you're like, well, I'm waiting for someone to build a path for me, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So you're right. And that perhaps is a challenge for us, because we really need to find the right people, because a lot of people expect that path to be built, and goes back to why the Halo way isn't for everyone, right? But to some extent, there's also what you're suggesting, which is, well, not only no one's going to build a path for me, but perhaps it seems like I'm not allowed to build my own path, because the problem is, someone could say, yeah, I want to go and do this. I'm going to do my own thing. And they're going in the complete wrong direction.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you got to put a stop to that. Right. It's not like you could build any path. Right.
Yeah.
People perhaps start having ideas that aren't in line with what we want to do, with our strategy, with our objectives, sometimes with our culture. Right.
Yeah.
And then the normal counter argument is, well, see, I'm not allowed to do whatever I want. But it's just understanding that it's within the objectives that we have set for the company.
How do you, as an employee at Halo, work out whether or not you're going in the right direction? Will people tell you early, or do people go for advice to check whether they're heading in the right direction?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question, because it's probably the biggest challenge, right? And it's the challenge with, I'm not scared to say, being left to your own device. I'm using a strong term, but there's positives to it, right? But the fact is you're not actually fully left to your own device, right? So you have access to everyone, and that's another very important part of the Halo way.
Yeah.
Right? Absolute unrestricted access to experienced people that make decisions, right?
Yeah.
People that set the high level objectives, right? So to answer your question, how do you find out, right? You either ask or get given direction, right? And I think that's another big differentiator where we actually set the direction, not based on someone telling us that, but what we see, and then we communicate it very widely. But then people can contribute in their own different ways to kind of getting where we want to be. So I guess back to your question, like, if it's someone's very, very obviously going in a different direction, they will be told that, right? And if they're just working towards like setting their own paths, like there's multiple examples. My favorite one is Dan Beals, my favorite person at Halo. Obviously, he had a path of establishing a partner success program. So finding ways to efficiently support our partners as we scale the partner program so much. And he just had to figure it out, right? Just how to do it, right? And he had full ownership over it, but he always, when he had a question or where he wasn't certain whether it was the right thing to do or not, he would always come to me, go to Paul and say, like, what should we do in this situation, right? So it's also having the confidence to go and ask when you don't know.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's true.
Going back to why the Halo way isn't for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Is I probably spoke too much and talked about so many reasons why it couldn't be for someone. But I think, and that's fine, because if it's just about, is the Halo way for you or not? If it is, great, you're gonna love it here. If it's not,
you're gonna hate it.
No, if it's not, it's not a prison, right?
Well, we probably won't hire you, most likely.
Yeah, we become a lot better at that. Yeah, or you realize it's not for you, and that in itself never creates any friction. Unfortunately, though, the fact that the Halo way isn't for everyone can create some friction. And when is that? Is when there's some aspects of the Halo way, right, that people love, right?
Ooh, yeah.
But there's some that they really, really can't come to terms with.
Yeah.
Right? And I would say probably, unfortunately, there's a lot of aspects about the Halo way that everyone loves.
Yeah.
Especially at surface level, right? Well, if we go really surface level, everyone loves a slide, a pool, and a table tennis table at the office, right? Very surface level. But, more on a serious note, right? Everyone loves autonomy. Absolutely. Everyone loves lack of control, freedom. Everyone loves being surrounded by like-minded people their age. Everyone loves the fact that we're a growing and booming company, right? Let's be honest. The fact that they could see the opportunity, right? Yeah. And those, in one way or the other, all of those are part of the Halo way. The social life, right? The travel opportunities, the fact that we are a small company that sponsors McLaren. All of those somewhat surface level elements, there's a lot to like, right? And because of that, it tends to attract a lot of people. They think, I really fit into this culture, right? And where does the friction originate? Where you really, really, really want to like those things, right? And you want to like them so much that you ignore that you cannot come to terms with the lower level stuff that I dare say matters more, right? That you're actually not compatible with, right? And that is the fact that you will have to set your own path. The fact that the goal setting will be woolly. The fact that you will have to figure out. The fact that you will have to work very hard, right? Yeah. And that goes back to what the Halo way was for me at the beginning. The Halo way for me at the beginning was 18 people in a 3-bedroom house, basically, right? Because that's what it was. Refurbished pub, right? Putting the head down from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day on 3 phone calls at once, right? Yeah. And that will create friction if that's not what you want to do, right? Yeah. And you can fall in love with everything else, right? And that's where there is basically, in my opinion, a misalignment between your expectations and what actually happened, right? Yeah. Because you really, really become fond of all of this and you ignore everything else. And at one point, it's gonna catch up with you.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is actually I think some of the things are two sides of the same coin. So like autonomy, it's the people like the freedom, but then they have to do the driving themselves, and then they don't like that bit of it. And it's like, well, this is what you want. It's the same thing.
Well, it's the usual thing. You can't have your cake and eat it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's that. And I think the only thing I'd want to add on that as well is that it is part of finding out what you want from your career as well. Sure. And sometimes perhaps due to a hiring policy, people still haven't actually understood, like you say, the conflict or the two sides of the same coin. And perhaps it's just that they don't really know. And perhaps after this, or after their experience at Halo, if there is that friction, if they're not a good fit, they will realize what they want. Right? Yeah,
that's true.
Some people don't want to be in such a hard-working environment because it still is. Yeah. Some people don't want to be given a lot of responsibility, right? Yeah. Which comes with progression, right? Comes with excitement in some ways,
Mm-hmm.
but also comes with endless days and
nights.
And nights.
Yeah.
And they don't know what to choose, right?
Yeah.
The analogy I always make, I love an analogy, I couldn't come to a podcast and not make an analogy, is my sister once, like, she's really into like psychology, she studies that a lot, and she says that a lot of the time, a lot of conflicts in just human relationships come from misalignment between expectation and reality, right? And that's the thing, like what you see at surface level is an expectation, this is going to be the best place to work at, right? It's amazing, it's great. But then you really, really become fond of those things and you expect everything else, right, to be great for you as well, right? But you then have an unrealistic expectation. You then expect that it's going to be everything you want, right? Because you've only looked at those surface level things. And when it's something that you don't want, when it's something like, oh, actually, like, you really, really have to put your head down, or even like it will take you longer to progress because you're not picking those things up so quickly, right? Yeah. So in theory, you could progress in 1 or 2 years, but if you don't, you're going to have to put your head down. And all those things are not in line with the initial expectation, and it creates that level of friction, right? And I don't think there's anything we can do. We're just going to have to accept that it will never be for everyone, and that's just how life is, I think. Like, it's just...
Well, a lot of that is to do with life. I think a lot of people now have an expectation that they should be happy all of the time, and that's also unrealistic. Like, everything comes with hard work, everything comes with ups and downs. Like, it's not just happy.
Oh yeah, it's totally
We're all
okay
happy all the time.
It's totally okay to have a bad day, and
absolutely.
Yeah, I guess in some ways that's also, I think, part of the Halo way, right? The fact that we're not this kind of fake company where we pretend everything is always great, because goes back to what I was saying earlier, like, freedom to be yourself means freedom to be frustrated and angry sometimes. Like, it's that as well. Yeah, I don't think I'd be here otherwise, as I said earlier.
Yeah, that's true. Wow, that sounds like maybe the Halo way isn't for me.
Yeah, I think you're too happy.
Not all the time.
Well,
I'm just happy talking to you.
I know.
So with all of that, where do you see the future of Halo, and also your future with Halo?
Well, you are really trying to catch me out already. Well, let's start with the future of Halo, right? I do really see us continuing this trajectory, right? I do see us continuing to grow globally. In terms of like our brand, right? I do really think there's a lot of work we can still do in terms of making the brand more recognizable. Paul,
working on it.
That's what we're here. I think Paul's vision of making Halo like almost be recognized as a synonym of good service, right? I do really strive to achieve that, right? It's obviously that's more of a long-term objective. In terms of the natural next steps. I do think that we will become a lot more well-known, right? Just in terms of the different industries we operate in. But I think the coolest part of our future, I think, is how we're gonna organize ourselves internally.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
I think that's actually quite interesting, because we could go different ways, right? We can go and set up multiple offices around the world. We can go and get a massive office. I don't know if there's any big enough offices in Suffolk, but hopefully
that's not what Maverick would suggest.
Yeah, we'd build one. Yeah, exactly. Not what Maverick would suggest. But yeah, just continue like hiring at this rate and growing and doubling in size every year. The theory or the idea I like the most is to the fact that we continue to develop people is to almost divide in business units, right?
Yeah.
Almost have a lot of different sub-organizations that are directly affiliated with Halo in some way or the other, but are groups of people directly responsible for specific areas, right? We're trying to do that, spoiler, with our US East Coast office, right? Go and set up a small unit there, make it grow organically, and give them some responsibility, right? business development in Florida, for example, or support throughout the US, but very, very clear defined responsibilities. Let them grow organically and let them run as businesses within a business, their own cost center, their own profit, etc. Right? And I can totally see us in the long run doing that in the UK as well. There is no reason that once we have enough experienced people, enough people that have grown to understand the Halo way, they can go and do that in the north of England, in Wales, wherever they want to go and set up an entity, right? And the only reason we're not doing that already is because it takes time, right? You need to it needs to start from someone who fully understands the culture, right? Or you may say fully understands the Halo way, right? And obviously we don't have enough people because the Halo way has been a thing for 3, 4, 5 years now, right? There wasn't that many people before. And it takes 3, 4, 5 years to develop to be at a point where you can do it. So it's definitely a future thing. But it really, really motivates me because no one really does it that way, or not many SaaS companies do it that way.
Yeah,
definitely.
That's for sure.
And if the Halo way is about doing things differently, which in some ways I think it is, then that's like the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
It's very easy to imagine. It could be that someone goes and does projects for the northeast of England. Right? Just as an example, right? Set up an office there. They receive projects, right? They do their own scoping. They quote for projects and then they implement them. Of course, they still represent Halo. I'm not talking about setting them as different entities or companies or anything like that in terms of from an external appearance perspective. But internally, they will have full autonomy, right? And the reason for that is because it will actually be easier to maintain the culture. When it's groups of 3, 5, 10. It will go back, hopefully, this is the vision, to feeling the way I felt when I walked into the old office. I'm focusing so much about the future of Halo that I don't really know where I fit in it. I think for now, I'm really like dedicated to what I'm doing, which is HaloITSM, global expansion of it, capturing a portion of the enterprise market, making it a more enterprise aligned tool, making it catering for larger organizations. And that comes with a lot of work. It comes with product improvements, experience with partners internally, documentation, functionality. There's a lot of stuff that I'm really like at a lower level, going back to what I said earlier, operationally working on. It's really like absorbing me, I think, in terms of like, I don't know, I'm really like focused on that. So I don't really think about the long-term future too much. The long-term thinking is really, really, really going to be good for Halo if we can become an enterprise aligned tool. Yeah. That's the bottom line. I guess, yeah. Once I had that thought, I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm going to try and make it happen. Right? Yeah. Which, as I said, is really challenging in some ways. But I think from a vision perspective, what I really, really like to think in terms of my progression is I'd love to be able to have like mentor someone to have a similar trajectory to what I've had. Yeah. Right. And become much better than me. Right. And I think that's something I'm struggling a little bit with, in the sense of like, you know, I had someone who mentored me and I could see it as I was progressing. I could see the steps. Yeah. Why haven't I been so able to do that with someone? Oh, right? Okay, yeah. Because if you mentor someone and they become better than you, right, then that's when you've really made it. Like that's when you've actually really proven what you're worth, right? I like and that. I think that's in the long run, because of course it takes 3-4 years. Like in the long run, that's what I want to achieve. I want to be able to see someone who basically takes my role, right? And who knows what I'll do. But I just want them to take my role because they're better at doing what I do in every way. And they became better by being exposed to how I do things, but just being naturally more talented. We always say that we want people that don't have big egos necessary, and that comes with that. Like, you don't really need the spotlight. It doesn't need to be you. Like, one of the things I hate the most, and if someone's looking at this and is from Halo and has done it, sorry, it's not personal, but I really don't like it when someone's hyper focused on the job title so they can update it on LinkedIn or things like that. That to me is nothing wrong with doing it. There is something wrong with deriving satisfaction from doing it. Someone does it and derives satisfaction from the fact that they can publicly be seen as progressing. That's tied to ego. Right? That's tied to wanting to be seen as someone who's a hyper achiever, like externally. And it goes back to my favorite concept ever, which is being intrinsically motivated as opposed to being extrinsically motivated, right? If you really, really like the fact that someone in your network, in your life is seeing your progress, it's because you derive your motivation by validation from others. Whereas the opposite of it does exist, and it's quite simply just wanting to do a good job. That's where you get your motivation from. Just in some ways competitiveness, like with yourself, right? Saying like, oh, I've done it, right? Who cares if no one knows I've done it? I know I've done it. That's where the motivation comes from, right? And it doesn't require any external gratification. Right?
Thank you so much for being on the pod.
It's a pleasure.
And you'll have to come back and maybe do why the Halo way is for you.
I think we covered that.
We did,
Yeah. Maybe we'll come back and do an end of year update of what's been up to. That'd be cool.
I think you should. Right. Thanks for watching this episode of the HaloIT podcast. If you like what you see, you can follow for more. And if you're interested in being a guest, you can email us at podcast@imaginatehalo.com.